You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and on tonight's show, we are joined, as always, by the lovely Kerry Greenaway. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, how are you?
Well, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Bright and breezy. I'm fine, thank you. I'm absolutely fine, thank you, yeah. Good.
Awesome. Have you done much over the last week?
It feels like I've done loads, but I kind of, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, what have I done? It's all just blurring into one at the moment. Everything just seems to be blurring, and any time I sit down to do something, I keep getting sidetracked, I think is the expression. I mean, I started looking at tonight's topic, and I ended up looking at crop circles, and I can't actually work out where the link was as to how I got to crop circles from tonight's topic, but hey-ho.
That's a bit of a one giant leap, I think, that one.
It is a huge leap, and I don't actually know how I got through the mental processes to get to... I don't know, because we're talking about vampires tonight, so I've got no idea how I got to crop circles from that, but yeah, interesting topic, whatever.
It sure is, absolutely. Yeah, you got anything planned for Halloween this year?
Oh, God, my son wants he says it's a party. I call it a gathering because he's too old to go trick-or-treating now, a pair of them.
Oh, you're never too old for trick-or-treating. No,
you kind of are. And they're teenagers, so it's intimidating. So I said no. Last year I did a big party, and it was too kiddish, apparently. So this year I've said, right, you can have a few friends round. So we've had to barter on how many. And it's all good fun, everybody, all good fun. And I've been told I've been banished to my bedroom from 10 o'clock onwards. So as soon as the show's finished, I'm banished to my bedroom.
I still think you should get the old Halloween games out as well. They'll love that.
Apparently I've now entered the realms of embarrassing mum. I used to be cool mum, now I'm embarrassing.
Yeah, I bet, if you leave a bunch of apples on the side of a big bowl, I'm sure that they'll all go apple bobbing.
there is an act to that, by the way, everybody.
Yeah.
So like when you put your face over your apple, you blow out, which pushes the water away and sort of buoys it up more. So you have to sort of like blow and grab. It's like there is a technique to it.
I always used to have a fork in one end and then go for it and then stab it.
Oh dear. No, but it's shaping up to be a great Halloween this year. Loads going on the socials. Looking at all the paranormal teams gearing up for their Halloween. Some did it this weekend. Some are doing it next weekend. As well as some midweek. So it's a full throttle ahead for the old paranormal teams, isn't it?
I've seen loads of different investigations going on left, right and centre. I think even Paul Stevenson from Haunting Magazine, they're doing as well, aren't they?
I believe so.
Bosworth Hall or something?
Bosworth Hall, yeah, we talked about that last Monday with them. Bosworth Hall sounds absolutely amazing, I've got to say, and it looks beautiful from the outside, like from the photos I've seen. And it's quite active apparently as well. So, beautiful surroundings, hotel. What more could you want? Nice little investigation going on. Fantastic.
Exactly. It'd be really interesting to see what goes on, and maybe get Paul on one show and have a quiz him about it.
Yeah, we did talk to him a little bit about what sort of hauntings and whatnot go on there when we had last Monday. But yeah, it just is an amazing venue. But there are so many amazing venues out there. I find that it's like a plethora of choice at the moment as to where you want to go and investigate for Halloween. I mean, I think I saw Hazel Ford from Haunted Happenings has just done this weekend, and then over the next week and next weekend, it's like their biggest amount of investigations that are haunted happening have gone on ever over Halloween. They've got something stupid like 26 was going on at the weekend, going on through. It's crazy when you think the amount of investigations that are actually happening all the time.
No.
It's fantastic.
It is, and yeah, it never seems to die down, which is awesome.
Yeah,
really good.
Definitely.
Yeah, I noticed again on the socials. You mentioned that in our Facebook group chat, in our Facebook group for the Parasearch Radio, we've got 977 members.
Is it that much? No, it's a little bit more than that. We only had like 11 to go, so it was like 989 or something. So if you guys haven't liked our Parasearch Radio group page, please do go over and like the page. We're up to 997 now. 3 more to go, and we hit a landmark for Parasearch Radio group page.
It's the group page. You need to share it and get people to join. The fan page is the one with the like, and I think we got 2,000 likes for our birthday.
Yeah, we did.
We were 2,000 likes for that, and we're up to 997 for the group page. So we need people to join. So share us all out and get us all over Facebook.
Most definitely. Your one-stop shop for all things paranormal, covering every area of the paranormal. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting live 5 nights a week.
And we're brilliant at it.
And if you miss the live shows, you can download the shows and listen on the go on your way to work, or when you're walking the dog, or when you're doing your housework, or, when you're not able to watch something on Facebook, which seems to be the trend at the moment. You can listen to us because we are downloadable. We go to podcast after we've been live. Well, what more could you want? And it's free.
I know.
Penny said the other day.
Yeah, exactly. And the amount of rubbish that's on the telly lately as well. All 50 odd channels if you've got Sky or whatever. They're all rubbish. It's just all repeatable stuff. Just turn it off.
No adverts.
No, exactly.
Just
brilliant,
pure
isn't it?
Paranormal. Have we plugged enough now, do you think?
Just a tad. Right. So, our subject tonight, vampires. We was having a bit of a discussion about this the other night, wasn't we?
Yeah.
For Halloween, this is our attempt at Halloween. So vampires. Where are we going to start with this? Because it's like a really big subject.
It is a massive, massive subject, but I thought let's give everybody a little insight into how some of our conversations go first, because some of the shows come out of conversations that we've had, as you've probably heard before on shows that we've done. And we were sitting there chatting away, and we were talking about the late David Farron, and because we both knew David, didn't we, Paul?
Yeah. And we've interviewed him a few times, and yeah, you can always have a listen back on the back shows. Not a plug there again.
On YouTube. Parasearch Radio. No, I think we were talking about, David Farron, and we were talking about Highgate, and we were talking about cemeteries, the big seven cemeteries that helped to embrace the dying, or the dead, should I say, not the dying, but the dead. Due to the increase of population, they were struggling inside the inner city London, so they did the Big Seven. And it led on to Highgate, which is one of the Big Seven, and David Farron, and the Highgate Vampire. And then that led us down like a little rabbit hole, because it was tickling a story in my head about a village that had, and I'm sure it was, and it was like one of those, I wasn't sure if the book I'd read was a fiction book or a fact, not a fact, but, like an urban paranormal type book. I wasn't sure if it was a fiction story or whether it was a paranormal folklore story type thing. And we started looking into this. And, the vampire thing, it was straight away in your head. It conjures up Bram Stoker, Transylvania, and all that sort of thing, doesn't it? But this actually goes back a lot further than that. And we started talking about Lilith, who actually is one of the very first, because it comes under the succubus incubus kind of title, but her particular fancy was blood, and it was taken from the neck, because Lilith is very linked to the snake, which obviously, as you all know, is the Adam and Eve story. Lilith was Adam's first wife. She was too dominant for Adam. So he moaned to God, believe it or not. So he took a rib and made a woman, basically. And that's why. And Lilith disguised herself as an apple. No, she didn't. She disguised herself as a snake to entice Eve to eat the apple. So, and there's loads and loads of things linked to Lilith in regards to this vampiric kind of creature.
I'm going to call you out on this one, like, because it isn't actually an apple.
No, we discussed this too, didn't we?
Yeah, it doesn't say anywhere in that story that it was an apple. Just want to get that out there.
What does it say? It says it's fruit of.
It's just fruit of the tree, fruit of the forbidden. It is a forbidden fruit, basically.
The forbidden fruit. That's right. And isn't it supposed to be? What other fruit was it supposed to be? Wasn't it the?
I think it was suggested the fig was another idea that was floated around, but I'm not sure. To be fair, it's just referenced as a forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
But now you know. I'm gonna let you crack on with that story.
Right. Okay. Well, anyway, whatever fruit it was, the apple, snake, blah 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 blah. So yeah. So going back, this thought of an entity coming in to your world and taking your lifeblood fluid, which blood is. If you haven't got your blood right, and that it's associated with life force. So to have that, it evokes deep subconscious fears. So anyway, I'd read this book. We was talking about this scenario, and I was trying to remember the thing. Anyway, we was doing a bit of online researching, and there was a place in North Yorkshire, because I said it was Yorkshire. And there is a village, a medieval village, that has, I'm going to use the term loosely, evidence, because they found a lot of mutilated bones in this village. It's a deserted village now, it's not a living village. They found a lot of bones, and on the bones there was knife marks. And experts say, they didn't say which experts, they just said experts, said it was the first evidence of practices to stop corpses from rising from the grave. So this fear of a corpse rising from the grave post-death to then come back and take its revenge or sup your life force to maintain its life force is very, very old. I mean, the bones dated from the 11th and 14th century. We know it goes back further than that. It's in mythology all the way through. And it is something that does evoke, as I said before, that deep subconscious fear of somebody coming and taking it. So, it's a fascinating story, and I didn't realise actually how many cases there were in the UK of alleged vampirism. There was loads, wasn't there?
There was quite a lot, but I think wasn't there like one of the first stories of vampirism going back to like something like 1110 or something, wasn't it?
Oh, are you talking about the Yorkshire Village one?
Possibly, I can't remember. I just have a vague recollection of you saying that it was around 1110. So is that the first one?
Well, this medieval village was, like I say, the bones dated back to the 11th and the 14th century, which is quite a way back, really.
Could be. Yeah. Could be about the same period then.
And isn't it strange that in this village there was 137 bones? Now, I don't know how many that equates into... How many corpses that would have been? No,
I don't know. I mean, in the human body, you've got 206 bones.
Well, it's only half a person then, isn't it? Of the bones they found. I think...
It could be that each bone was from a different person, maybe.
This is true. But most of the knife marks they suggested were on the head and the neck area, suggesting that they've been decapitated or dismembered. So that's quite an extreme thing, isn't it?
It is, and I know, like I think wasn't it the Victorians that used to put cages around to stop the bodies coming back to life. Oh. So it's something that's gone through the ages.
I think that's more of a mythology thing with the cages over that, because when we looked at the body snatchers back in that time, we looked at how bodies were snatched for analytical purposes in the medical profession, and so people would put things like cages over the graves to stop body snatchers. So I do think that's more a mythological jump of
thing for witches as well, though.
Again, it's not proved. It's said we've got cases in the UK of where things have been suggested that's why, but no proof that that's why. As in, there's been no proof. I mean, I have to say, this village, Warren Percy, there's none of that, but there is this indication that there was mutilation to the body, and that thought of them rising from the dead to come back is prevalent. Now, we can look at the history of graves and what people have done over the years, but again, the Victorian era, you do have to be very careful because of the body snatcher scenario. So, that we look at it as purely a Victorian thing, but it probably overstretched different generations of, periods of time. So people would have done anything to protect their loved ones. The thought of their corpse, you've got to remember the religious belief of burying your dead, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's interred in consecrated ground. We do that for a reason. You had to have a massive cultural mind shift to go into cremation. I think people underestimate that mind shift that society had to make because of that deep religious belief system that we should be buried, not burnt, and that that sort of, you have to bear that in mind. So people would go to all sorts of measures to protect their loved one's corpse. And the other thing is plague pits. I always imagined, I suppose, that plague pits the bodies would just be thrown in. They weren't. They were reverently wrapped, even if you was poor, and laid in lines in the plague pits. So even that sort of thing, there is a respect for the corpse, do you know what I mean, of people, regardless of social standing, even though some people couldn't afford maybe a gravestone or anything like that. It was, a very deep-set cultural need to be respectful to a person's dead body, to their corpse. And, we've looked at, burial rituals from all sorts of cultures over the years, doing Parasearch, you come across them, don't you? But the fact that these bodies have been have evidence of mutilation is an indicator of the belief system that it is possible for a corpse to reanimate after death. It was, as you said, widely feared, wasn't it, I think? It was, yeah, very much so. It's incredibly interesting because why else would they do that? What other reason would there be for it? There is no reason for them to do that. And there are, we came across a case of a body, I can't remember where it was now, but I know it was on a crossroads and it was buried upside down. So the witch couldn't, she was buried on a crossroads. It was buried on a crossroads, and she was actually buried upside down, not feet first, like head down, not flat. Yeah. And that, again, was supposed to confuse them, so they couldn't rise again. And there's loads and loads of little stories across the UK, of little tales like this. A lot of the outer lying villages have got sort of some tale or other in that way. It's fascinating.
Okay, so what other cases have you found then that's like quite recent ones? I know we did lots of them.
Well, there was quite a few. As I say, I remember when we was looking at this the other night, we found an article that referenced the Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe.
Yep.
And he in this article it stated he'd found 11,000 cases over the years. That's a lot.
That is a lot of cases. And didn't you say you found out where they were all from as well?
Well, he had. I didn't look into that article too closely. I just saw it referenced. But I think
11 of them from Essex.
Oh, I can't remember.
I'm sure that was the figure you come out for Essex, just alone.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I know we've definitely had a werewolf, and that's local to me, so...
That was a Southend werewolf in 1980.
Southend werewolf, bless him. But you was talking about the Victorian era, and one of those stories that came out from that time was the Crogling Grange Vampire of Cumberland. Loved the name on this one. This one's absolutely brilliant. Now, this was basically, again, that sort of age, you've got to remember the time. And I think this is so incredibly important in any story that you read. You have to remember what it was like back in the day when people were living there. Penny Dreadful pamphlets were like the mainstay of the day. They were almost like little horror movies all by themselves, and took an absolute fantastic turn when Jack the Ripper was stalking the streets. But the Crogling Grange vampire... again, no proof, no real proof on any of these. So are they just urban myths? Are they just ghost stories that people were telling and have sort of like evolved into something? Who knows, right? But the story goes that, oh dear, somebody hired the Crogling Grange, okay? Now, it was the Cranswells. Now, it was two brothers and a sister, and they basically rented this house. Now, back in the day, again, a lot of the times you would rent a house. You wouldn't just you wouldn't buy one. You would rent it. Yeah. So, they've rented this, and everything came. Everything was fine. But during the summer, it became a problem. Now, it was very, very hot on the night in question, and the tenants took the opportunity to watch the moon. Right? Obviously, it was a lovely bright moon this particular night. Now, the sister, Amelia, went to bed, laid on top of the bed because it was so hot. But although her window was open, she had her shutters shut. Now, she couldn't sleep, so she was gazing out of the window. Although, again, there's a contradiction right there. In regards to the shutters, the window was open, but the shutters were shut, but she was gazing out of the window. Makes you kind of wonder. And they overlooked a churchyard. Okay. And apparently, two flickering lights seemed to be moving amongst the trees. And then she started to feel a bit weird about that and didn't like it. They emerged from the tree line and turned into a humanoid figure. The figure approached the farmhouse, and then Amelia felt an urge to act on this. So she raced to the door, just in time to unlock it, right? Because she could hear scratchings coming from her bedroom window and everything. Why she was going to unlock it, I don't know. You would think she was running to lock it. But, as I say, this whole story has discrepancies the whole way through it. So I kind of think this is more like urban legend storyteller kind of thing. Because of the amount of things, I'm thinking, no, would you do that? That's like 101 of surviving a horror movie, right? Don't go and unlock the front door.
Unless you might do it.
Anyway, what happened was she sort of like looked back at the window, and there was this figure stood in the window with a hideous face, bony fingers, quintessential vampire looky, and tried to suck her blood. Her brothers went to investigate, broke down her door. The invader disappeared into the night out the window. The brothers chased it, and it was too fast for them. It just disappeared.
Okay.
She survived. She did survive. They went to Switzerland to recover.
Oh, as you do, yeah.
Back in the day, kind of things you would do, isn't it?
Yeah. Nice.
I know. But they reckon it could have been a lunatic that had, escaped from a nearby... again, it's pure urban myth, isn't it? An inmate from the local asylum has escaped and, was what she witnessed. It could be that she got herself into a trance state and imagined it. So almost like a sleep paralysis kind of scenario, even though she was sat at the window. You've got to sort of look at things like that, haven't you?
Yeah, and you got the epilepsy as well, form of epilepsy, haven't you? That does something.
Well, yeah, except they came back to Croglin afterwards, and allegedly this entity came back. The brothers responded again, apparently shot it in the leg,
Okay.
and they reckoned that the monster, they call it a monster, had taken refuge in a crypt that once belonged to a family in the area.
Okay.
They investigated it the morning after the night because they weren't brave enough to do it during the night.
Yeah.
And in the crypt they discovered several coffins, and one of them was intact. And inside was a fresh corpse with a bullet wound in its leg.
Okay.
So they set fire to it, as you do.
So they could have just basically shot him, and he hid in the coffin and died, and then they burnt him.
They could have done, but it was trying to suck her blood. I would just like to put that out there. It wasn't exactly... If it was a real live and kicking person that had done this, and that's what had happened, the logical explanation of what had happened, then didn't really have a good day, did he? But he was trying to suck her blood, so maybe not such a good move, right?
Yeah, I mean, was the girl bleeding?
Yeah, she had blood loss. She had to go to Switzerland to recover, goddammit. Come on now.
Well, yeah, it must have been major then.
Mind you, they were very, what's the word? Precious little souls back in the day.
Gone over to Switzerland for the Swiss chocolate. Yeah, we know.
It's a good restorer of blood, I think you'll find, the old chocolate. Now, there is, going on to graves, because, again, a good old vampire story has to have, like, a coffin or a grave or something like that in it. Now, there is one on the Isle of Wight at the Malu churchyard. Now, this burial plot is one that you were referencing earlier, which has got chains on it.
Right, yep.
Okay, now this actually belongs to a couple called Matthew and Margaret Hassell. Don't know a lot about them, but I do believe that one of them was put on unconsecrated ground and the other one was in consecrated ground. But large groans were supposed to be coming from Mr. Hassell during his wake. But bodies do make weird noises when they're dead.
Do.
Once you've passed, your body doesn't stop, does it? It makes weird noises and gases escape and all sorts of things happen.
It starts to shut down slowly, and then, yeah, as you said, the gases build up, and they just escape any way they can.
It's not surprising that during a wake, I mean, this is the 1850s as well. This is going back to the 1850s. So, could it just be the natural body decomposition that was making those noises? But they took it that he was going to be a vampire, so they sort of stake through his heart, jobby.
Yeah, they could have done. But then equally, he could have been still alive and they give him a really bad funeral and he's like, oh, not again.
Possibly. But
someone he didn't like, he's like, oh.
And then they put these chains around the grave. There is another theory that Mr. Hassell was actually a suicide, which is why he wasn't allowed on consecrated ground. So
that's
why it's on the boundary, and that's why how come the wife and husband is still sort of together but not together, one in consecrated, one in unconsecrated. Yeah. So that's a theory that's come out because they don't actually know why. Again, many mythologies and urban myths around this particular grave, and but they still don't know definitively why the chains and the stakes were put around it at all. And it's really famous photographs of this particular grave, I have to say, on this one. It made me wonder if there's old Fae folklore that iron is toxic to the Fae. They won't come near you, or if you've got iron on you, they tell you to put it down if you want to sort of talk to the fairy folk. So it could be the belief system in fairies crossing over into a a blood-sucking vampire, but there's no real link to vampirism except they thought his corpse was reanimating because of the noises it was making post-death. That could have just been naivety.
See, but then we got iron in our blood, so it wouldn't. That's where your theory of the Fae comes falling crashing down.
Not necessarily, because their belief system isn't vampirism. Their belief system is Fae in the Isle of Man at that time.
Okay.
So it wouldn't necessarily. We're linking it with vampirism, like a corpse rising from the grave. But like I say, on this one, there's no actual evidence of him doing that and sucking someone's blood or attacking somebody or anything like that. There's just comments that he was making noises after his death, so they thought he was reanimating. So they drove a stake through his heart, and it could possibly cross over with a Fae. Because if they thought it was a changeling, if they thought a Fae had got there's a mythology amongst the Fae that they'll steal babies and replace them with a fairy baby, but it's not. It's an elemental in a physical baby form type thing, and they're called changelings. If they thought that had happened to the guy, then that would maybe why.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm making assumptions. I'm just looking at possibilities. I'm musing, everybody. Musing.
Yeah, just like one of our chats to bring out these sort of conversations.
Yeah.
I could see where that would go. But I'm still in favour of your when he's maybe committed suicide.
That would explain why they're buried the way they're buried. It would explain why they're buried, but it doesn't explain the chains and stakes. Who knows? Pardon?
And maybe it's because it makes it look pretty, the chains.
Mm.
And they thought they'd give him a steak for last meal.
Yeah, it doesn't look very pretty. I would like to say that. But,
Well, we're clutching at straws.
Who knows, eh? Who knows?
Exactly. Yeah. So pardon the pun, but what else have you dug up?
Well, we have to talk about Highgate Vampire, being as that's where the conversation started from, really. Highgate, we're talking about the West Cemetery, not the East. It's got a massive historical background to it. Again, we did a show with David Farron and Patsy Sorrento on that particular one, talking about the mansion of Highgate and then going into the cemetery and stuff like that. What's there? There's water there, there's ley lines that run across it, and there's a black figure that has been seen quite regularly in that area of Highgate. And in fact, it seems to be boundaried into the cemetery.
Yeah. See, although it's called the Highgate Vampire, it's not necessarily a vampire, though, is it? It's just a spirit.
No, but we've talked about psychic vampires before, and a lot of people have said that when they've encountered this figure, the drain on their energy, so it will be a psychic vampire rather than a bloodsucker vampire. It's that sort of thing. I say we've discussed psychic vampires before, and we do have that. We recognise that as a... People do it without even realising, I think, sometimes. We've talked about how, someone can stand in your auric field and you can feel uncomfortable. It's not right. You feel drained afterwards. And I think some people do it without realising. We talk about that in the field. Use my energy, we say in the or people say, I don't say that, but, in the paranormal investigations, use my energy, step forward, use my energy. You're allowing them to take energy from you. Although it's a permission thing in regards to allowing something to take your energy, to give them energy to manifest or whatever the situation be. It's a vampiric situation. It's allowing that to happen. And as I say, you don't have to be dead to do that. People, how many times have you had somebody come around or you're talking to somebody and by the time they've gone, you're absolutely exhausted? It's that energy exchange that is taken from you in some instances.
Yeah. See, I'm not so sure that tends to work. When you on an investigation, and you go like, if you're there, do like tap on the table or whatever, make a noise, use my energy. They don't tend to use it because all they manage is little taps on tables. That's not enough for me. I'm not saying good if they're going to use my energy.
Yeah, I saw the seance that you were taking part of. You're so sceptical, aren't you?
Yes, very. It's just that with tiny taps and things like that, it can be attributed to like the building cooling down or pipe work. There's just too many other things. Yeah, so if spirit's there and they want to make themselves known, do something that we can say, what the hell was that?
But you've been personally affected by a possible spirit in regards to timing and stuff of things. You've been affected.
Absolutely, and that's the stuff I want.
And that's the stuff you still can't explain, although you've got your logical side going, probably was, I don't know, something you ate or, it just happened to happen at that time, coincidental pain, at that time, how many times you suddenly get a headache and it could be your sugar blood level crashing or something like that, but we attribute that to a spirit. You do have to have a skeptical perspective, but you also have to be open-minded to the fact it is spirit, because you have got to remember they have limitations. If they didn't have limitations, then everything would be happening all the time. The limitations come from crossing a dimensional or a realm. We talked about this with Liam last week in regards to the difference in terminology. If you're asking a spirit to step over or an entity, and we've got really a bit off the topic of vampires now, but if you're asking them to step over a realm, that's not an easy process to do, and it's something you probably would have to learn and practice at.
If I say to them, I want them to use my energy, I want them to use it productively, not just a tiny tap on a table.
Well, sometimes there's just no pleasing you, is there?
A full fist, full force on the table would be good.
Careful what you ask for, Mr. Rook.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm actually going back on Wednesday to the Antique Centre.
Are you?
Yeah, for their seance again. So any spirits there, banging on the table, levitating the table would be good. Blowing the candles out all at the same time. Fab.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. That's the sort of activity I want.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, back to vampires.
I've lost my train of thought now of where I was going with that. Ah, yes, modern vampires. We were talking about psychic vampires. There is still a huge belief system in vampirism. There are givers and takers in regards to a modern cultural hobby. Lifestyle choice. Lifestyle choice. That's what it is. Not hobby. It's a lifestyle choice of where, people, and there are clubs that you can go to and that where you can either be a giver, whereas rather than biting and creating blood that way, they tend to use like a razor, and they don't drink huge quantities of blood, but it's very sexual, isn't it? It brings it into the realms of being very sexual. So I do feel vampirism takes a crossover in regards to the incubus succubus thing, because of the giving of blood is very sacred. It's very, very sacred roots in that. And if you're prepared to do that for your partner, it's a very sexual, intimate thing between two people.
Yeah, and that's sort of that's sort of the line I was going down the other night during the discussion, because it is. It's quite an intimate thing, isn't it? I think
definitely need a health bill, a clean health bill if you're going to partake in that, and people who embrace this lifestyle don't just embrace it with the blood sucking scenario, but they also do live the legend, as it were. So they'll change their sleep pattern. This is what I called you a vampire the other night, because they change their sleep pattern to be awake during the night and sleep during the hours of daylight. They live their lives like that, and they say it's called an awakening. When people come to this lifestyle choice, they say it's an awakening. And I was thinking, it's a different form of spiritual experience almost. Bear with me on this thought pattern, because in the spiritual world, we talk about the awakening in a different way. You awaken to your spiritual side, you awaken to your psychic abilities or your sensitivity or your empathic abilities, and your recognition of understanding signs and omens and outside influences on your life from an unexplained source.
Yeah.
Is a form of awakening. And when you start awakening to that, you start seeing them everywhere. That validation comes from everywhere. It's crazy sometimes, some of the things that do happen. I was, just to give you guys a little hint, I was talking to a friend outside work the other day, and a crow came and landed on a bar that was there very close to us. And my friend sort of like looked at me and it chirped 3 times at me. I say at me. It just chirped 3 times. I took it at me. Because you do when you're a witch. And I went, thank you, message received. It chirped 3 times more. I went, you can go now. And it flew off. She was absolutely, the girl I was talking to was absolutely open-mouthed. Could be completely coincidental. It looked like me and this crow had an exchange. For me, my belief system is that was a warning of some form. You know, crows are very relevant of omens and stuff like that. I took that because of that belief system. It is coincidental in the fact that the way it happened and it left at that time. But because I'm awakened, that's the sort of thing I will see. And that's the sort of things that happen.
Yeah.
Okay? And I have the sceptical side where I go, I'm going back to sceptical. I'm trying to sort of sit on the fence here. So when these people are talking about their lifestyle choices and awakening, I'm wondering if it's an awakening to a different form of energy level. It's not vampirism as in deliberately sucking blood. Maybe it's the rising of that kundalini, that energy force that's within you, and when you partake it of somebody else, it is a spiritual thing more than a sexual thing. It's all very read as a very sexual thing, but maybe it's actually more of a spiritual perspective or a spiritual experience than it is. Oh gosh, I'm babbling now.
No, I know, because I think it's more of a case of what makes them feel comfortable within themselves. And if that's because well, you know what I'm like with the sleep patterns. I sleep most of the day and I'm awake most of the night in that sort of sleep pattern, and I'm quite comfortable with that. I like that because, I mean, I've got pretty much 3 businesses to run, and I get to do lots of work and no distractions.
Mm.
So I'm quite comfortable in that sleep pattern. When I switch because I have to do things during the day, it just isn't me. I get drained really quickly, and I just don't like it.
You are most definitely a different person during the day to who you are at night. I will say that you do seem to be more alert, I think is the question, is the explanation. You do seem to be more sharper at night than when I've talked to you during the day.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's almost the same thing with like the awakening with you, for example. You're talking more spiritually, and it's something that you're more comfortable with. Mm. And I would assume it's the same with the people that are into vampirism. Mm. If that's the way they are comfortable, then why not go for it?
Oh, as I say, lifestyle choice, perfectly your own free will situation.
Yeah.
But it was just the way they spoke about it. It was the awakening. It did it sent me off down a little rabbit hole of thought pattern really on that one because of the terminology that they used. And I did wonder if it was that awakening within themselves of a more spiritual perspective, and that is being subconsciously driven by that giving and partaking of the bloodletting. Because blood, as I say, earlier on we was talking about it, bloodletting, or it's, forget the medical perception. They used to let blood and use leeches, didn't they? They thought that cured all ills, was bloodletting. Actually weakened the patient, as we know now, but back in the day that was a very fundamental thing. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, with bloodletting, it started off quite a satanic ritual. When people had, for example, headaches, they would drill into the head, which is quite a medical procedure these days. They still do it, but for different reasons. But when people used to have headaches on a regular basis, they used to drill into the skull to remove a piece to let the devil out, because they thought it was the devil causing headaches. But obviously these days we've actually discovered that sometimes when the brain swells, you need to release that sort of pressure, so it does help. So we still use that procedure, but just for different reasons.
I was thinking more medieval times where they would actually cut a vein and bloodlet.
Well, yeah, they do that as well. Yeah.
Is actually where I was going with that. But going back even further, they use blood in many rites across the globe. And even now, in some forms of magic, you would incorporate blood into that ritual to give it that life force. It's that belief of life force again. So if you put your own blood into a ritual, you're giving that ritual or that intention a life force of its own. So the use of blood, or the thought of blood, although it's gory and gruesome and horrific, and is actually the one thing that will evoke the strongest reaction when you see blood in an accident or something. It's like, oh God, you're bleeding. It's that straight away. You're bleeding, it's bad. Straight away it's that emotionally evocative, gotta stop it kind of scenario, which is true, for medical reasons, obviously. But it's a deep-set cultural. We talk about deep-set cultural beliefs that are set in, and that goes back a long way. And the rituals of, using blood in rituals to provide that life force going forward is prevalent. So the thought that something could come in and take it without consent is incredibly powerful. And don't forget...
using blood in rituals and things like that, I think it's almost like gives it more power because of the belief system. It's almost like another symbol to reinforce what you're doing.
That intention work, exactly. I mean, it's the same sort of thing when we use when we talk about sex magic. It's reaching that point of orgasm for that energy release of moment. So it's that point of release. And controlling that for the perfect point in the spell work, to the peak of the spell, the peak of the orgasm that you have, that lends that energy to that spell. It's the same thing if you bloodlet at the same time. Blood bonds, when you think back in the day, this practice has actually gone out of practice because of we know more about diseases of the blood, but hand fasting used to be a bonding of blood together, the marital thing. Blood bonding was a huge part of that. It was, it took its realm back into the blood brothers kind of scenario and all that sort of thing. But blood itself is incredibly evocative and powerful, and it's a bond that can't be broken. And that's the other side of it, is if you make a blood bond or you do a blood ritual or you do something like that, it's a bond that can't be broken. So you're getting an idea now of the power that the idea of blood being taken from you against your will by an external entity to sustain their life force, and they keep coming back to you, is incredible. I mean, we haven't even spoken about Dracula. I mean, Dracula, as we know, Bram Stoker's Dracula is, to a lot of the places, are very recognisable. Whitby Abbey, very recognisable now in regards to vampires, and, that's Gothic, Victorian Gothic imagery. It's so instilled now that... But it does go back a lot further, the vampirism. And it surprised me when we was having a quick scoot around the other night. And it did make me think in different ways. It did on my mind when I was thinking about it. My mind was going off in different angles as to how it linked into other belief systems that were around and how weird it was. And then it took me more into this story, and it's just still so very prevalent. And of course, we have Halloween coming up this week in the next few days, haven't we? So we're going to see lots of little vampires wandering around, I'm sure. Or clowns, actually, these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to take some garlic out with me when I go out Thursday. I'll start throwing them at these little vampires.
But wasn't Pennywise, we talk about the clown, but wasn't Pennywise a form of vampiric entity?
Yeah, it was, yeah, because he'd use the energy, wouldn't he? And he'd have
the
all
energy of fear.
Yeah, and he'd feed off your fears.
Feed off your fears and then bond with you, so you would enter the drain with him. I haven't seen it. I'm assuming from.
That's pretty much what it was. It would give you the illusion of things that you're scared of, as well, and literally feed off your fear, and that's what gave him the power.
Yeah.
So when the kids confronted him and they're like, "I'm not scared of you," that's what sort of beat him, because obviously it knocked his power. So
and they say face your fears, don't they?
Absolutely, that's probably where it came from, but not really. I don't know.
Good old Stephen King.
I know. It was really.
But feeding off your fears, again, we talk about that in the field. Be careful of your energy signature when you send it out. When you enter into a paranormal investigation or a spiritual situation, you be careful of your energy field, because, we say you attract what you give out. Your vibe attracts. So if you're going out into the field in a very negative mindset, or you're having anxiety or depression, or, you've got, negative emotional situations around you, it's not good to go out into the field, because if you have this kind of entity come in, then they will use that.
Absolutely. Yeah, they'll use whatever they can, can't they, really? So.
Mm-hmm. But still won't bang on the table with a fist in the way you're after.
Well, they're rubbish then, aren't they?
Although I really kind of want them to now. I really hope that happens to you.
We was at Cudnor Castle, and whatever spirit it was managed to bang on the door really loud, made everyone jump. That's the sort of stuff I want. That's why we're going back.
And that again, that is why you're going back, isn't it?
Yeah, and that spirits can do that. So while all the time you've got these spirits that all they want to do is just tiny taps on the table with their finger, so no, you're rubbish. Go away. I don't want them spirits. I want a different class of spirit now. I've been doing this too long. Yeah.
I've been doing this too long, he says. And yeah, you're doing what, a 72-hour lockdown at Codnor to try and debunk everything that happened to you on that night. And, we're not saying that's vampire at all, everybody. That is not what we're saying. But it links in, when we talk about, the feeding off your fear or feeding off your emotional state and being aware of yourself in regards to investigations. It's so they don't draw off things like that if you have, that kind of situation, because they can make it worse. If you have got a psychic vampire or a spiritual entity that is going to do that.
Yeah. But anyway, on that bombshell, we've actually come to the end of the show. We've got a few minutes left. So what's coming up for the next week?
Well, we've got quite a week lined up this week. I mean, as if it wasn't enough with tonight's shows for you guys. Well, Penny is actually away this week, so I'm trawling through some of the back catalogue of her shows. There are near 100 of them to pick a good one for you guys to listen to tomorrow night. Then on Parasearch Radio on Thursday evening, they've got Bloody Mary, Voodoo Queen herself, in the studio talking all things spooky. Gosh, that's a good show to listen to on Halloween, a Voodoo Queen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is generally her name, not just someone we don't like. It's like, oh, Bloody Mary's on again.
Yeah, actually, I think that was the first question. Was like, what do we call you? Do we call you Bloody Mary, or do we just call you Mary? What do we do? I think that was one of the first questions Carl and Sam asked her, because we actually had to pre-record that one. But it's a fascinating interview, everybody. If you haven't if you've got nothing to do on the 31st, then definitely check that one out. The Dark Mirror Show on Friday evening. Well, as always, we're looking at the current affairs of what's gone on in the paranormal field and taking a dark mirror stance on everything that has gone on. And then I've got a special interview for you guys on the 3rd, which is Sunday the 3rd, a special interview. I managed to pin down Greg and Dana Newkirk before they come to the UK for Sage Paracon. Absolutely, well, even if I do say so myself, absolutely fantastic interview. They're brilliant people, well worth a listen to. Knowledgeable isn't the word for it. Loved their perspective on things, and it was great to actually ask some of the questions I've been dying to ask them for absolutely ages, and I tried to get some sneaky spoilers, but you're going to have to tune in to find out to see if I did.
Awesome. And have you got anything other than Parasearch planned for the weekend? Because it's firework displays and stuff for the weekend, isn't it?
It is. That is something everybody has to be aware of at the weekend coming up. You have got a lot of firework displays going off. Because it is the second, it tends to be the big display night tends to be on the Saturday. So hopefully the weather will hold for people doing their displays. But I've got firework night. I'm going to firework nights.
Okay, where's that one you're going to?
Oh, it's only on Canvey. It's local to me, but they do a really good display with music and hog roasts and wine.
Awesome. I'm actually covering a firework display on the 3rd on the Sunday in Basildon. The Basildon firework display. So I'll be with the ambulance day that night.
Well, I expect you to go into the Tannoy tent and play my Greg and Donna Newkirk interview out. If people are still around, okay?
Yeah, I'll play it as the fireworks go off. So every time you ask a question, the fireworks can explode. Anyway, I want to thank everyone that's joined us in the chat room. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. And thank you, Kerry, for joining me tonight. And I think that's pretty much it. So it's a good night from me.
And it's a good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.